The great city of Indianapolis, for the 12th straight year, the place where the Big Ten will crown its football champion. 14 teams start with this goal, and 2 have arrived. Michigan and Purdue getting set to square off tomorrow at Lucas Oil Stadium. And speaking of which, here we are at Lucas Oil Stadium. Dave Revson, Joshua Perry, Jerry DiNardo, and Howard Griffith. Guys, really exciting to be here every year. A little bit different feel. This is the first time ever we have had one of the home state teams qualify to play here in Indy. Obviously, with Purdue, a little bit of a buzz in the air here in the city.
Certainly a buzz, and I always go back to when we're at Big Ten Media Days because we're here in Indianapolis on the field at Lucas Oil, and you hear about all the players and coaches talk about their goal of making it here at the end of the year, but only 2 teams get to do it, and they took a little bit of a different path, each one of them, but it's going to be an exciting game.
It's a great venue, too. I mean, this is a great place to have this kind of game. Both teams had to win their last game, right, to get here, and both won impressively. Both rival games, Michigan and Purdue, both look really good in their rival games.
Yeah, you think about some of the things that Purdue went through all season, the ups and downs, but they were finally able to make it here, which is significant. You look on the other side, you talk about Michigan, which really has an opportunity, in my mind, to cement themselves as not only the leaders right now in the Big Ten Conference, the team to beat, but an opportunity to go out and do it on the national stage in the 14 playoff.
Let's get into our big story. It is this matchup between Michigan and Purdue. And if it feels like these two don't play very often, that's because they don't. Just their second meeting in the last 10 seasons. That is the fewest of any 2 teams in the conference. Purdue has a giant killing history, as you're probably aware. 9 wins all time against the AP top 2 when unranked themselves. That is more than twice as many as any other school in the nation. The Wolverines, meanwhile, 19 straight wins against unranked foes. And Howard, a couple of really good stories, and you kind of talked about it there. I think Michigan has reestablished itself now as one of the elite programs in the country, that it needs to be mentioned in the same sentence as Alabama and Georgia and Ohio State and Clemson, because they are going to be in the playoff almost certainly for the second straight year. And how about Purdue? Did not get a single first-place vote in the preseason media poll, and yet here they are playing for a Big Ten championship. 2 really good stories.
You know, we walked away from Purdue in the summer saying this is a team that has an opportunity to win the West. They have a great opportunity. You talk about just the schemes that they run. When they're able to be comfortable, this really difficult team to really slow down on the offensive side. And then they had their defense really rise to the occasion in several of the games this year. But I think you look at Michigan, and you talked about being now one of those teams that now can compete for that national championship each and every year. The one thing they have to do, they have to win playoff games now. It's just not going to be good enough to get to the Big Ten championship game and win. But now they need to win on the national stage, and I think that's when the respect factor will start to come back in for this Michigan program.
Yeah, and I think this game is an opportunity for Michigan to continue this. You know, to me, it always comes down to recruiting. I mean, one of the reasons Michigan's here is the recruiting. How about Donovan Edwards? Donovan Edwards establishing himself as the starter going into the playoffs. So that's going to be a critical thing for the Michigan offense. And I still think JJ needs more reps on the deep pass. You know, it was really good against Ohio State. I'm thinking that Purdue's going to cover the Michigan wide receivers a lot better than Ohio State did. And the last thing, Joshua, momentum going into the playoffs. I mean, they're absolutely a playoff team, whether they win or lose. But they don't want to lose this game going into the playoffs. They want to win it. They want momentum because their first draw is going to be one of the best 4 teams in the country.
I think the momentum thing is real, but they've got it on their side. And I think what we learned from this team a year ago is how mature they are, because they had that emotional victory in Ann Arbor. They were able to come here and get a very convincing win in the Big Ten championship game. You flip the page to this year, they were perfect in the regular season. That's something that's really difficult to do. You see a lot of teams that'll end up winning a national title, and they don't do it with a perfect season. So for Michigan to be able to make sure that they take care of their business on a week-to-week basis, I think was huge. But I look at this Purdue team, and the resolve stands out to me because there was a part of the season where it felt like nobody was ready to win the West, but Purdue kept making all the plays that they needed to make in order to get here. And now that they're here, you mentioned the giant killing history. This is a team that can rise to the occasion.
You want to talk about resolve? How about Aiden O'Connell playing through incredible personal tragedy with the loss of his brother last week, something he did not go public with until after the game, but remarkable the way he played in really challenging circumstances. So let's dive into each one of these teams and what's at stake here. And I think we're all in agreement that Michigan is going to the playoff. I mean, you just look at where Ohio State is. They're number 5. Michigan just beat them soundly in Columbus. Clearly, they're not going to drop below Ohio State. So the worst thing that could happen, you would think, is Michigan ending up at 4. Clearly, they don't want to go there. But when you think about what's at stake, to me, it's making sure you don't end up at 4. Obviously, you'd love to be number 1, depending on what happens with Georgia. But if you're 2 or 3, you get to avoid the other really elite team right now, and that is Georgia. So to me, winning this game goes a long way toward establishing yourself as one of those top 2 teams and getting a more favorable draw.
Yeah, I think the seeding is important as you talk about the 4-team playoff. You would certainly like to avoid Georgia in the first round, and Michigan had that matchup a year ago. It certainly did not go their way. So that's important here. I also think for this program, as we talk about them as one of the national powers, having that conference championship is going to be big for them. You talked about the recruiting aspect of it and how much that means there, but just the pride of saying that you've won the conference back-to-back, and now it has to go through Ann Arbor for anybody to take it away. I think that's big for this Michigan program. So as you look big picture, of course, seeding within the CFP, but as you narrow it down to this program, back-to-back championships is huge.
Yeah, I'm not confident at all, regardless of what Michigan does, that they'll move to number 1, because this win isn't going to be as impressive as last week's win. I think they should be number 1 now. And so, again, to me, it's momentum. It's playing a really clean game. I would suspect this won't be an overly emotional game for Michigan, just because the emotions were high last week. They've been here before. It'll be a little bit more businesslike. But again, to me, this is all about playing really hard, having momentum going into the playoffs.
You know, one of the things that we've noticed, you watch the tape of this team, you watch this Michigan team as we've covered the entire year, this team's always dialed in. And I think that speaks to volumes about the coaching staff and obviously the players that can get up each and every week. And sometimes they've had slow starts, but they were still able to bounce back and really take control of games in the second half of games. So to me, there is a lot at stake that's for this Michigan team, but I think at the forefront, it's about winning this game, another opportunity to win a game and to solidify themselves in the playoffs. We talked about they're probably in anyway, but as you mentioned, you don't want to, go in on a bad note. You talk about Purdue. It really speaks volumes, I think. You talk about transfer portal, and you talk about Purdue being able to really take advantage of that. That's what they're going to continue to be able to do, being here. They're going to continue to be able to strengthen that roster because that's what they need to do to be able to continue to compete at a high level. Scheme is important, but the players that you have on your roster that are running the scheme is more important, I believe. And I think they're putting themselves in an opportunity not only to have a chance to go to a great bowl game, but to enhance their recruiting, enhance some of the situations when you talk about guys that are looking to transfer into your program.
Yeah, I think there's a big recruiting piece for Purdue. Having coached in this state, there's not a lot of players, but there's some really good players in this state, and they'll compete with IU for players every year, and to be in this game gives them an advantage against Indiana in the recruiting. If they throw the ball around the lot the way we think they are, nationally, it's going to always give them a chance to recruit a quarterback and a wide receiver. So this is an opportunity where there's no other games on, right? There's a lot of young people watching this, so I think recruiting. You think about Purdue Stadium last year. You remember the crowds? I mean, that place was rocking like it hadn't rocked in a long time. So they go into the season with momentum. Win or lose this game, they go into the season with a lot of momentum for their program. Purdue's program will never be looked the same as it will be after this game because they've separated themselves from half of the West Division.
I agree with that. I mean, the momentum for this program is absolutely outrageous right now, and it started with last year, and I'm glad you brought that up because they've continued to build this thing into something that stabilizes a top-end program in the West, and you start to dig into how they've built it. I think that there's been more of a buy-in defensively. Like, we would talk about Purdue, and all we would talk about is what they did on offense, but defensively, they have taken steps. They're starting to run the football with a lot more consistency. So now you're getting balance on offense. And as they've done those things, they've become a way better football team. But there's this idea sitting in the back of my head right now. Don't know if it'll happen, but Purdue wins this football game. Are we talking about going to Pasadena for a Rose Bowl?
Well, they are. I mean, if they win, I think you kind of need to clear that up because I'm not sure that everyone fully understands this. If Purdue wins, they go to the Rose Bowl as the Big Ten champion. Yeah, it's crazy to me that somehow we still have to clear it up, but I'm going through Twitter this week, and it doesn't seem like people fully understand that. If the Big Ten champion does not qualify for the playoff, They go to Pasadena, and you think about what an accomplishment that would be for Purdue. They've only been there twice all time. They haven't been there since 2000. So we are talking a generation of Purdue fans who have never had a chance to experience one of the most special places in all of college football.
I mean, the Rose Bowl is the pinnacle of college football to me when you talk about bowl games. And as a player, I never got to experience one. On the media side, I've been to 4 of them, and I think it's one of the most perfect things. I mean, you get the sunset over the mountains. It's just everything about the game stands out to me. So this would be huge. Like, this is something that people should embrace right now about where Purdue is.
And the way they play the game, they're the only West team that throws it around a lot. That's their chance to win the game, as long as it just doesn't turn into a pass rush drill. But if they could throw the ball like they usually throw it, they've got a chance.
I mean, they need to play perfect. They need to come out and play their best game, and that's what they need to do. But I think it doesn't, no matter what happens, I don't think it diminishes what they're able to gain by being here. And you talked about separating yourself from some of the other teams. There were many teams that had an opportunity to be here and did not seize the moment. Purdue found a way to seize the moment.
They were the only ones that won to get in. They were like the third team to be in that situation,
Yes.
but they did it
But
in a rival game in Bloomington.
Absolutely. No, got it done, and now a chance to win their first outright Big Ten championship since 1929. They've won one ever.
Jerry was in 3rd grade.
Oh, stop it. Why do you
The only thing that was unpredictable is which one of you was going to say that.
Tomorrow. Back on Big Ten Today, live from Indianapolis as we check out the tale of the tape when Michigan has the ball. Wolverines awfully good offensively, particularly the ground game. They lead the Big Ten in both yards per game and yards per carry, 5th in the nation in both categories. Purdue kind of a middle-of-the-road defense, 8th in the conference in scoring and rushing D, 11th in pass efficiency D. The Wolverines will unfortunately be shorthanded for this one. Blake Corum, the Big Ten running back of the year, going to have knee surgery. He is out for the season. He was hurt in the Illinois game, tried unsuccessfully to give it a go against Ohio State, got a couple carries. Really tough news, and obviously wish him the best. A huge blow, although Donovan Edwards went over 200 yards last week against Ohio State. What's the impact of having him out?
I think depth more than anything else. I think we know that Donovan Edwards is a high-end running back, and you mentioned what he did against Ohio State, but he's shown throughout the season that he can really be a home run hitter from the running back position. So now as you start to evaluate where this Michigan offense is, the depth becomes a question because we know that they emphasize running the football, and they're going to want to get a ton of carries to that running back room. So they're going to have other guys rise up to the occasion. We've seen C.J. Stokes in there. We've seen Gash in there. Those guys are going to have to play big. But I think the other thing that you're missing too, and you want to make sure the other guys are aware of this, is the leadership that comes out there on the field from having Blake Corum. So those two big things, the depth and the leadership, they're going to have to find a way to replace.
Yeah, I say the leadership. They're one of the teams that huddle. Having Blake Corum in your huddle is a major deal. Having him, he'll be on the sidelines, obviously, but having him play in the game, I think he's as influential as anybody else on that team. We might see JJ running more decide option. On Edwards' long runs, they were all off the option fake, and there was on one of them there was 2 defenders defending JJ, and that's when Edwards broke it. So you don't really want to run JJ a lot, but if you need to because you don't have Blake and you want to highlight Edwards a little bit more, much like you did in Columbus, then he's either going to have to run that scheme or actually carry the ball.
Yeah, I think that, when we look at it, right, and you talked about the depth, I think that's going to be important. They have the players that have also been able to contribute and contributed at a high level all year long because Edwards has been out of some games. So they've established themselves in that room as guys that are going to be able to carry the ball. But to me, what's fascinating about Edwards is that I actually think this run game can be better with him at the tailback position. Now, keep in mind, we've already talked about it. He's replacing the Big Ten running back of the year, and we all agree the leadership that Blake brought to the room is significant. When they look at him, they're like, yeah, I mean business. We're going to get this done because he's done it before. Edwards' skill set, even with the soft cast, in the pass game, is something that this offense doesn't have or hasn't had on a down-in, down-out basis. Edwards gives them that with the cast on. So I think this offense can even be more explosive because now he can move out to the slot and catch the ball. He can line him up in a lot of different places. And remember, the last 2 years, when he's been, to me, when he's had the biggest impact, it's been in the passing game.
Sure.
Because a linebacker and a safety struggle to be able to cover him.
So, but Howard, I think as well in the run game for this reason, that long run that he ran against Ohio State, he was threatening.
Which one, as he said?
Yeah, he was threatening the width of the field. JJ is threatening the width on the other side, on the decide option. With Blake, you were threatening more in between the tackles and JJ on the flank. Now you're threatening the defense. Both flanks, that's a little harder to defend.
Yeah, and I think on Howard's point, you talk about hitting home runs. Like, Blake Corum is the back to me that he's going to hit you for some 10s and some 12s and really wear you down. And that's how he's going to accumulate his yards. We saw what Donovan Edwards did because he was hitting 1s and 2s and 3s, and then he hit you for a 75 and an 85 all the way to the end zone. That's explosive. That's where this offense evolves. And you talk about the pass game, I totally agree with you just in terms of what he can do there. I think when they were at their best with the running back pass game, though, it was both of those guys in the game. It was Blake in the backfield. It was Donovan Edwards split out, and that's one thing they're going to be missing.
And Edwards outran the Ohio State secondary.
I mean, he was gone, and they couldn't catch him.
This is a fast track, and what Harold said the other day on the call, nobody on Purdue's team made first, second, or third all Big Ten defense.
Yeah, just to clarify for those who are not on the inside, that's Harold Shelton at BTN Stats Guys and our fabulous research. But no, I mean, to your point, he's a home run hitter, right? He's the first player ever in Michigan history. Think about how many great running backs they've had ever to have 2 touchdown runs of 75 yards or longer in a game. So that's the run game. Let's get into the pass game. J.J. McCarthy coming off his best outing as a starting QB. Threw for 263 yards, 3 touchdowns in that win over the Bucs. The 4 completions of 30 yards or longer equaled his total from the prior 8 Big Ten games combined, though it is fair to point out he only completed 50% of his throws in the game, 12 of 24. So how much of what happened in those big plays was JJ, and how much of it was Ohio State's defense?
I think it was equal. I mean, even if Ohio State cuts a guy loose, J.J. McCarthy has to hit the pass. So you can't just say, well, he was hitting wide open guys. There's some guys that miss. Quarterbacks aren't perfect. But when you start to really dig into it, statistically, sure, it was his best game, but you mentioned 50% on the game. You talk about passes that were 10 or more air yards down the field. He was about 30% on those passes. So there's still an evolution to this pass game for Michigan. As well as they played and as explosive as they were in the deep passes, I think J.J. McCarthy can be even better. And that's probably the scariest part about this offense. They haven't even unlocked the top end of what they can actually be right now.
Yeah. He's really going to have to get better because guys aren't going to be as open as they were. Now, you talked about the receivers a lot this year, saying it wasn't just J.J. They couldn't shake coverage. They shook coverage. I mean, the receivers got better in Columbus. I think they come in with a lot more confidence in the pass game. And JJ will have some opportunities tomorrow to do the same thing, but the windows are going to be tighter because what you learned is that Ohio State's defense doesn't work against this offense, right? You have to have someone in the middle of the field that if the ball is thrown vertically, someone has to be able to front the ball up at some point.
I think one of the things we're also missing with this, and we talk about zero blitz and a lot of that stuff and the coverages were being played, JJ still had to stand in there and had to stand tall because they were bringing the pressure, and there were unblocked people that were coming at him, and he was able to hold on to it to the last minute before he delivered it. Can he be better? Absolutely, he can. And he's not going to see that type of coverage in this game. So it's going to have to be timing. He's going to have to throw guys open. Guys are going to have to be able to shake coverage. But I still believe he can do that. He continues to grow as a passer, and that's one of the things you have to do at the position. He's playing on one of the elite stages and elite programs in all of the country. And he's having to do this, each and every week where he knows that he's going to be leaned on. He's got to be the guy to make the plays. He just has to continue to get better and continue to make them. And when they do unlock this offense, this is going to be a very difficult team to be able to slow down. And I'm not just talking about this year.
For sure.
I'm talking about moving forward even to next year.
His toughness on that first touchdown, the one that wasn't a deep ball, it was like that.
He stood in there.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. They don't block the free safety.
No, there's somebody right in his face. Yeah. And that's the one thing you can say about J.J. McCarthy is I thought there were moments in the first half of that game where he looked a little bit rattled. Like he looked like a young quarterback coming into the horseshoe for the first time. But as that game went on, and the look on his face and some of the passes where he had to stand in there because he had pressure, that touchdown run he had where he made the safety make a decision about whether he wanted to actually make the play or not. He's got it up here, and that's the biggest thing a quarterback needs to have.
And to me, that's what makes this offense and makes him, I think, why his teammates really rally around him. He outruns his offensive line who's getting ready to block somebody because he knows he needs to get it in and he wants to get it in. So he's willing to do whatever it takes to win games.
And we talked about his ability with his legs and that maybe that was ultimately what won him the job. And so we saw a little bit of that. The guy he beat out for the job, a guy who took Michigan to the college football playoff a year ago, Cade McNamara, has a new home. It is in the Big Ten. He announced yesterday he is heading to Iowa. Again, McNamara led the Wolverines to the CFP a year ago, more than 3,000 career passing yards, joins an Iowa team that finished dead last in the Big Ten in total offense. The fabulous sports town of Indianapolis has hosted 8 men's Final Fours, 4 on the women's side. Super Bowl 46 was right here in this stadium a decade ago. And, of course, annually a fantastic home for the Big Ten championship game. The strength versus strength matchup in this one is Purdue's offense against the Wolverines' D. Boilers second in the Big Ten in passing yards per game, dramatically better in the run game than they were a year ago, but will be tough sledding against the Wolverines, who rank in the top 3 nationally in rushing defense, pass efficiency defense, total defense, and scoring defense. Howard, it starts with the pass game for the Boilers. Only Ohio State averages more passing yards per game in the Big Ten than Purdue does. How do you see this matchup for them against Michigan?
You know, I like the matchup because I like what the Braun brothers are able to do as far as scheming up defenses. They're going to have some opportunities to be able to make some pass plays in this game. But it really comes down to what the guys up front are able to do. The tight ends, the offensive linemen, the backs, when they're in, they have to be able to keep Aiden upright, and he can't be under duress. We've seen him throw the football around for a couple of years now, and when he's comfortable, it's hard to find a better quarterback in the pass game. But keeping him comfortable would be a challenge because this is a Michigan team that's going to try to get after him.
Yeah, the expression every pass play starts with protection, I think that really relates to this game. And so how do you do that? You know, you max protect, you get the ball out of your hands as fast as possible, and you get it to Durham and you get it to Jones, the 2 best players. I think we're going to see Jeff come out and feel his way a little bit because I think he wants to play complementary football. He wants to keep the safety in the middle of the field on defense, don't give up any big plays on defense, and then just try to figure this thing out the first half of the first quarter before he starts throwing it all over the lot. But they'll have their hands full protecting.
I disagree. I think it's going to be gadget plays galore early on for this Purdue offense because why wouldn't you try to keep Michigan off kilter at least early? And you're going to run out of some things, but, you know, if you can get a spark offensively, maybe get out to an early lead, now you start to play the game a little bit more.
How many trick plays would that be?
Well, a lot. I mean,
4, 5, 6?
30.
Wow.
He's drawing them up. But as you really start to dig into it, both of you guys mentioned this idea that Purdue is going to struggle to protect Aiden O'Connell. I tend to agree with that because of what Michigan has on their defensive line. You mentioned max protections and getting the ball out quick. The other thing that you do, which Purdue has done a good job of this year relative to other years, is you run the ball. You slow the pass rush down by running the football. You get those guys having to make a decision on whether they defend the run or they defend the pass pre-snap. They can't guess. They can't just pin their ears back and go.
No doubt.
So I think the balance that Purdue has shown this year actually gives them an advantage against a defensive front that typically would just be able to get after the quarterback. So they've got to establish that run game. And we know it doesn't mean a ton for Purdue, but at least a little bit, get it going early.
The one thing I will say on the pass protection is, and this isn't the only measure of protecting a quarterback by any stretch, but Michigan only has 10 sacks in the last 6 games. So they haven't been getting home as much as they were early in the year. And then to your point, Purdue really can run the ball. I mean, that is the big difference between last year and this year for Purdue. Obviously, it's been Devin Mockabee who has been the story. You see the numbers on him. This is a young man who was headed to Navy before Purdue came through with a walk-on offer. 5th among FBS freshmen in scrimmage yards, 4 100-yard rushing games. Keep in mind the Boilers did not have a single 100-yard rusher all last year. It's a team that was dead last in the nation a season ago in yards per carry. They're 85th this year, so not setting the world on fire, but they're good enough to keep a defense off balance that you have to respect the possibility that they could hurt you with the run game.
And this is something that this offense hasn't had, right? They've had something this year where they've been able to rely upon it in times. And it's about being able to call the run plays as much as it is to be able to execute, to take pressure off that passing game. And he's really done a remarkable job. I mean, he runs hard. He does a good job inside between the tackles. He makes guys miss. So he's added a dimension to this team that they haven't had. And you think about this, and, I'm going to say something about the walk-ons, but you think about their key players, right?
Yeah.
Their stars, they've been former walk-ons. And, it just also shows you just the drive and the ability that these young people have. And, Jeff Brom has been able to get the most out of them, and that's significant.
Yeah, and the stats tell us they're not going to outrush a team like Michigan, although they have outrushed some opponents during the year, but that's few and far between. But when they get to 100 yards rushing is really the number for Jeff Brom calling the offense. The issue is 1st and 10. The issue is you want to run it on 1st and 10, but if it's constantly 2nd and 9 and 2nd and 10, then it becomes a pass rush drill, and then it's over. It doesn't matter how many sacks Michigan's had. If this becomes a pass rush drill, it's a problem. And so that's why I think he's going to start slow. I just think he wants to measure this thing and then try to figure it out and then try to be explosive. He's in no rush. I mean, not that he wants to win 7-6, but that might be his best chance.
The 1st and 10 play calling, I think, is a huge deal because of all the things that you mentioned. I think that leans a lot into creativity, too, for Jeff Brom and how you're going to find creative ways to make sure that you can be on schedule when it comes to 2nd down. Devin Mockabee, to me, is remarkable. I had a chance to sit down with him earlier this week and kind of chat. And one of the things I learned about him has nothing to do with football is the high school that he went to was a technical high school. So he picked up a trade, and he learned how to be a mechanic. And so now all the guys, when they need an oil change, tires, and they need new brakes, they go to Devin Mockabee. They said he's an even better mechanic than he is a running back. So he's an interesting cat. All that to say, the dude is a hard hat and lunch pail type of guy, right? That leads
That's their
into
team.
The
That's
blue
Jeff
collar
Brom
mentality of what they do. So it's so interesting that you would have a mechanic back there who runs the football the way he does. And this guy seeks contact at times. When he knows he has to get the yards, that's exactly what he'll do. So I think it's interesting now that we're not just talking about them throwing the football all the time.
I just remember talking to Jeff Brom when we were there at camp. I think I brought this up with you yesterday, Jerry, and mentioned to him, you're last in the nation in yards per carry last year. Where do you need to be for it to be a good enough running game? And he basically outlined exactly what they've got, that we just need people to be able to have to respect our run game, to have to say, hey, they could get something out of this. They've got to defend it. It's exactly where they got. Now, Michigan's really good. I mean, they give up like 85 rushing yards per game, but they're going to have to commit some people.
It's basically the NFL offense, right? I mean, that's what the NFL does. They throw the ball, but at some point they got to get them out of a pass rush stance.
You guys comfortable with Michigan at 2, or do you agree with Urban and Jerry they should have been number 1?
I think they should be number 1 personally because of the quality of going to the Horseshoe and beating Ohio State the way they did and by how much they did. I also see where the committee's coming from and how they're ranking these teams because Michigan's got a great win over Ohio State. They've also got a really good win over Penn State. I mean, they dominated that game. Penn State's sitting there at number 8, but you start to look at Georgia. Georgia beats Oregon, who's number 16. That game wasn't close. They beat Tennessee. That game really wasn't close. They beat Mississippi State, who's at 24. They beat South Carolina, who's sitting at 19. And so they're going to say that they have, more quality wins within the CFP top 25. And the thing that they're still going to hold against Michigan after all this, after all we've seen them do all year, well, you didn't play anybody in the out-of-conference, which was so long ago. Because the Penn State and the Ohio State victories, to me, I don't care who you played in the out-of-conference. It was a big deal they did that.
I still do believe that the committee has a great deal of respect for where Michigan is at this point. And the win over Ohio State, I think, probably solidified the way they felt as far as that non-conference schedule was concerned. Yeah, it was a non-conference schedule, but when they had to play at the biggest moments on the road, they went out and had a dominant performance. I think they just believe that Georgia has done more over the course of the year from week 1 to championship week than Michigan had. But, whether they're 1, whether they're 2, the fact that they're in and they have that opportunity, to me, is where they can really make a statement.
Let me also say this. For Georgia, it matters more to be number 1 because then they can play in Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas for Michigan, I'm not sure there's a decided advantage
Atlanta
versus playing
Arizona.
in Phoenix.
Mm-hmm.
I think the most important thing is avoiding Georgia in that first game.
Totally.
I would also say that as it's currently set up, I think you're better off as number 2 than you are as number 1. I mean, wouldn't you rather play TCU than play USC? I know we're splitting hairs. USC's probably going to have the Heisman winner. TCU might have the Heisman runner-up.
Yeah.
I'll say this about USC from what I've watched is this is a game where Michigan could be really good because USC is a team that thrives off of taking the football away, specifically interceptions.
Yes. Yep.
And that's something Michigan does not do. They're not going to throw it to you.
Mm-hmm.
And USC's run defense is bad.
Yes.
They are bad at
Clearly,
stopping
the worst unit of all of those 2 teams, those 4 units, is USC's defense.
No doubt.
I don't think there's any doubt about it. I guess I'm just saying, maybe the better way to phrase it is I don't see it as that big a deal, whether you're number 1 or number 2, other than saying we're number 1.
Yeah, probably.
And at the end of the day, they both got to go out and win, right?
Absolutely.
To get to the championship game.
No doubt.
And that's really what Michigan has to focus on right now. First and foremost, they need to focus on what they need to get taken care of tomorrow night, and then they can start to look ahead. But this is a Michigan team that's really built in the way they play defense, the way they are in special teams, the way they have their offense set up is built to win a championship right now.
Tomorrow, we are all over the Big Ten championship game at 11 a.m. Eastern. Don't miss a special Big Ten Live from the Fan Fest right here in Indy. Then at 2, Big Ten Tailgate gets you ready for the showdown between Michigan and Purdue. And when the game is over, the Big Show delivers all the post-game reaction and analysis. Always get some of the winning players up here on the set. Ton of fun. All tomorrow on the Big Ten Network. There is the scene right now at the Fan Fest. Not a whole lot going on now, but there will be very soon. If you are in Indy and have never been to the Fan Fest, it is raucous. And you get a chance to watch the Big Ten Network as well and maybe be on television. So a ton of fun. Let's get into our X Factors. One thing that you are watching in this game.
I talked about it a little bit earlier, but the gadget plays for Purdue, the trick plays, and the inventory that they're going to have, because I think Jeff Brom has been a creative play caller regardless of who he's going up against and what the situation is. I think if you've got anything left in the tank, this is the game to pull it out. What are you holding on to him for? So I think that he's going to want to display creativity. I think if he feels there's an opportunity based off of what he sees on the field to hit a big shot and get off to an early lead, he would want to do that too. So just the creativity overall and how he uses his great personnel offensively.
And I've already talked about my X factor. I think it's 1st and 10 run. And I think for a team like Purdue and a play caller like Jeff Brown, this is a little tricky. Doesn't have to be big. It just has to be, is the defensive line and the linebackers, are they playing run at all? If they're not playing run, I better get back to the run. I don't care how many yards I gain because I can win the game throwing the ball. Only if it doesn't turn into a pass rush drill and the defensive line have all their weight forward and they're rushing up the field on the snap. They're rushing up the field.
Visual, yeah.
For me, I'm going on the field in Jake Moody. I think that in a games like this, we've seen this Michigan team, struggle a little bit to find their legs early. I think this will be an opportunity that he'll be able to rely upon them with extra points, but also in field goal opportunities and attempts. Inside, perfect conditions for him to be able to kick in, and I think he'll have a significant part in the game early until this Michigan team can find out exactly what they want to do, because I think Ron English is going to have a game plan early to try to slow this team down, and they'll be able to make some plays defensively. I'm not saying they're going to turn them over or get interceptions, anything like that, but I think they will make it difficult early for Michigan to be able to move the ball.
As Coach Harbaugh would say, legendary Moody.
I really do think, though, special teams is a big edge for Michigan because they value it so much. And we've seen some of the plays that they've gone out and made this year, blocked punts, things of that nature. If there's one team that I believe they could find an edge on special teams and would use it, it would be Michigan in this matchup.
And to your point, too, and this is something we've talked about all year as maybe being one of the liabilities or the areas in which Michigan could improve. They're still just 7th in the Big Ten in red zone touchdown percentage. Now, if you're scoring from 85 yards out, it doesn't really matter. All of a sudden, that negates the red zone. But it is something that they have not done as well as they would like to do, and having a kicker like Moody is a great safety net there.
And that's where you lose Blake a little bit, down there. He's the tough yard guy. It was 3rd and 3 against Ohio State, and J.J. wound up taking the ball in. And it was a heck of a play by J.J. on the option. But that red zone, the closer you get to the goal line, the more the interior matters.
We haven't talked a lot about this offensive line, and I'm sure we'll do a lot of that tomorrow, but this is a really talented group that's really, I think, elevated their level of play. Coach, it's been a lot of talk all year whether or not that they're better than they were last year. Yeah. They'll tell you themselves that they believe that they're better. They believe they're more athletic this year, more experience, and they'll need that as they continue to make this run.
Yeah, this offensive line for Michigan is really intriguing to me because I think they're better, but not for reasons people maybe believe. I think they're better because they work in unison. There's not one guy who's out of place on any of the schemes when they're trying to hit some of those big plays. It's not necessarily mashing people and road grading. And you talked about Donovan Edwards' big runs. I think Oluwatimi was huge in those runs because he got a seal. Didn't necessarily create a ton of movement, but got just enough, and then Donovan Edwards can skip right through there. And that's the mark to me of a great offensive line. It's like when it's easy to just push people off the line of scrimmage all day, sure, you look great. But when it comes down to the execution of the details and the fundamentals, that's what they do extremely well.
How about Sharon Moore coaching the offensive line, taking on the responsibility of coordinating?
Yes.
And the offensive line still continues to get better.
Yep.
He's a big reason for it as well.
Listen, I think the coordinators in this game for Michigan have done an unbelievable job. It's got to be very difficult, Coach. You'll know this when you have offensive and defensive coordinators. Minds may not all be on the same page. They have done a marvelous job of really being able to take their team to the next level.
It's still one of the great mysteries how Michigan
Just one of the mysteries.
I mean, because like with the building of the pyramids. Right? It is.
Who's calling it, Coach? Well, we all do.
We all do.
What do you mean?
Flip a coin. We've got it figured out.
That and the sideline interviews have been two of the highlights.
You don't want to talk to me. You want to talk to this guy. Look at this
Loves
guy.
football.
What's Chef Brom saying to his team tonight?
Let's have fun. We're gonna let it sling. We're gonna be aggressive both on offense and defense.
We've got an opportunity. We really do, to shock the world, and they've done it before. Not on this stage, but the opportunity is there.
Maybe